All right. Well, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for joining us live. This is going to be an incredible episode. I'm very, very excited about it. I'm your host, Anthony Parent. I am the host of IRSMedic. I've been a tax attorney for about 20 years, and I've really got. Oh, hold on a second. I got a little. Hold on a second. I had the other pot live in another tab, so I started hearing myself talking. I'm like, wow, what an interesting sounding gentleman. Anyway, I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I have my special guests, my long-term friends. We go way back on this effort, and we got together, became friends because we want to end double taxation for Americans overseas. We want to look at get some fairness into the system. We all come from a different perspective, by the way. With me today is Keith Redmond. Keith is and Keith, by the way, it's a long-standing joke. Keith is actually a handsome man. And he promised me one day we'll get him on camera.
After I get the family house cleared out, I can do it.
There you go. See, we have a promise. You all heard that, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better than one of Trump's promise. And Keith is really, Keith runs a group on Facebook, American Expatriates Overseas, and that's a great group.
Residency-based taxation. Yeah.
And here's a link to it. And I know a lot of people from that group are on us live. They join a lot. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. And if you are watching on X, that's fine. It's hard for me to comment on X, though, if you do respond. So if you are looking to engage, it's better if you can find us on YouTube, the IRSMedic channel on YouTube, if you do want to comment. We do try to get to everybody. And we had really our record attendance last week, which was really, really exciting as we were talking into a lot of these things. Our channel's building speed, and I do appreciate everyone sharing. It does help us a lot. We have a lot of AI bots we need to overcome, and oftentimes people can't find our content. So I've been doing so I started as a tax attorney myself. John Richardson, the great John Richardson, though, isn't a tax attorney. He came through this a different way. You came through it through citizenship and all this fun stuff. And so John and I kind of meet two different worlds. I'm coming from the tax world. John comes from the immigration and citizenship world. And that's kind of where we merge. And then Keith is our nice human touch. That's what I think makes this formula work so well. So thank you. Good morning, gentlemen, to you. I'm going to turn it over to John. John, I really like your presentation. We're going to get it up there. And then we want to talk about some tweets before we get going. Is that right?
Well, I think we should, okay, because what's going on right now with the appeal of this case, it really needs to be understood as a very, very deliberate attempt on the part of the Treasury Department to very, very specifically deny Americans abroad the benefits that they should be allowed under the tax treaties, and two, it is therefore a very specific, definite, knowing effort to impose double taxation on Americans abroad. This is not an accident. There is no other way to put it. A deliberate, unprovoked, unprincipled, unjustified attack on Americans abroad. It is, to use their language, willful.
Well, John, I was trying to keep my my blood pressure a little lower this morning, but I don't think that's going to happen because you're absolutely right. What is going on? This is the post that I had, my little summary. This is the one that I could promote for this is the one that I could promote for $500 to overcome the AI bots. But if you're on Twitter, if you could share this, because this is really what's going on and this is what's needed to be done. This is sort of the summary, and this is a summary of where I came from. We merged together. We met in Washington D.C. at the repeal FATCA hearing. It was fantastic. We're really excited about getting things done. We had Solomon Yu on the show. Yep, Donald Trump promised to end double taxation. So here it is, the large, stupid, ugly bill. And we have a policy of strategic uncertainty, which is not really something Donald Trump invented, but rather it's been articulated by Secretary Bessent, which we actually can thank him for, because that phrase actually does describe the U.S. federal government incredibly well, how large it is and how unknowable it is. So anyway, I was very excited to be at least a small part of Donald Trump's campaign pledge to end double taxation for Americans abroad. However, not only does the large, stupid, and ugly bill not offer any relief, but Donald Trump is now actively fighting a court decision that allowed Americans to offset their net investment income tax, that is Obamacare taxes, which somehow still exist. Well, that's interesting. with their foreign tax credits in order to avoid double taxation. The bait and switch is truly breathtaking, and unfortunately, the cult of personality, in my opinion, blinds too many people from seeing the very clear application of tyranny with dishonesty. I ask those, and really I do, I ask those who are still supporting Trump on his tax policy, is there anything he can do to lose your support? Is there anything that would be too far for him to do? Do you have a red line of what Cam promised he can't break? Or is everything he does just automatic proof of his awesomeness? Is this about trusting the plan? Or is this strategic and certainly a good thing? Do you like being confused, being unable to defend his policies as you can't understand them yourself? And that's really what that's the quickest way I found to quiet someone who says, oh, this big ugly bill is a great thing. It's like, have you read it? They never say yes. And so that is my opinion on this. And that's where I'm looking at this. And so, John, but back to your poke, because you have the details, and we discussed this article before. So what was the court decision about? What was this victory that Donald Trump is trying to overturn? Can you tell us a little bit what that was about?
Yeah, first of all, I suspect that Donald Trump personally has no knowledge of this. I also suspect that Secretary Bessent has no knowledge of this. Nevertheless, okay, it is clearly the policy of the Treasury Department, which they do oversee, okay? And it is clearly willful, okay, with respect to the Treasury Department. Let me see if I can explain this as simply as possible, okay? The tax compliance industry generally, and all those who are accepting of citizenship taxation, always point, they say, well, I mean, what are you complaining about? It's just a compliance issue. After all, you get a dollar for dollar credit for taxes paid in the foreign country to offset those U.S. taxes. Well, that of course is, it's either the world's most ignorant statement or an outright lie, and it really doesn't matter which. Okay, however, in 2012, the Obamacare tax came into effect, which was really an overlay to the Internal Revenue Code. What it is at its core is a separate tax on investment income, interest, dividends, and capital gains. Now, it appears in Chapter 2A of the Internal Revenue Code, and I mention that because it's not part of specifically the income tax part of the internal revenue that allows the foreign tax credit. So the argument has been that, and this is absolutely true, that the Obamacare surtax was written specifically to disallow foreign tax credits under the Internal Revenue Code. Okay. It's a way of punishing those who invest outside the United States. In other words, they might as well have said, go ahead and invest outside the United States if you want, but we are not going to let you use tax paid to that other country as a foreign tax credit to offset the U.S. tax. Now, that would be true for, anybody living in the United States who couldn't benefit from a tax treaty. However, the United States has a network of tax treaties. And although the interpretation of those tax treaties has been difficult, there have been a couple of court decisions, the Breu case coming out of Canada, the Christensen case coming out of France, that essentially say, not so fast, buddy. Okay, you know what? These tax treaties create an independent right to use foreign tax credits to offset U.S. tax over and above and without regard to what the Internal Revenue Code says. So far, so good?
Yeah, and I think this is a great, and I just want to interject because what we're talking about is that, hey, a tax treaty is not a law. It's a tax treaty that's ratified by the Senate, and it's kind of hard to get one through. So when you have a treaty, that is a big part, and I would say that sort of comes from a different part of the Constitution. It's not coming from the legislative branch. It's really not. It's just coming from part of it.
True. But Anthony, to stay on point here, right? The practical impact of it is that the treaty says, or it has been interpreted in these court decisions to mean that Americans abroad, can use foreign tax credits paid on investment income to offset the net investment income tax. Now, I think that's basically a good summary. Maybe there are some ambiguities around the edges, but that's how you've got to think about it. Now, the key point is that the Treasury but is making a conscious decision to appeal these decisions. In other words, they are making a conscious decision, knowing full well that this subjects Americans abroad to double taxation. They are making a conscious decision to get those rulings overturned and therefore to impose double taxation on the investment income of Americans abroad. Now, that is completely accurate. No reasonable argument can be made to the contrary. And I strongly urge the community of Americans abroad and armchair commentators to describe what's going on properly and don't get caught into the technical details here that do nothing but confuse the issue. Once again, to be clear, the Treasury Department, with full knowledge that the Obamacare surtax presumptively imposes double taxation on Americans abroad, with full knowledge that two courts have ruled that tax treaties provide relief against this, that is, the tax treaties are to be interpreted as creating the right to use tax paid on that foreign investment income to offset U.S. tax. With all this knowledge and understanding, they are making the decision to appeal this decision. Why? To impose double taxation on Americans abroad. Now, Anthony, that's the real story. You're not going to get that from Law 360 or tax notes or any of these. That is the real story. Okay?
That's right. That's right. You only can get that here with the great John Richardson. Thank you so much. I mean, this is incredible, John. And honestly, I think where we are, I feel, to be like in the center of this entire insanity. As we've seen, we've been following this for years, and we had that promise, and now we get weirdness. And I think the problem is that, and what your point earlier before is, does Donald Trump even have a clue?
No.
I'm kind of like, yeah, is he even just an actor doing what he's told? I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure.
This stuff is so complex that 98% of the tax preparers in the United States wouldn't even understand what I just said, okay? Because they have no, experience with treaties, or maybe not 98%, but most of them.
No, you're about right, I'm going to say with that.
All right.
I think you're right.
But look, the point is that this raises a number of complex, very technical issues. And it's only a certain group of people who, have tolerance and patience, to try to unpack this stuff. But I think what's important here is to understand what's really going on and not let the discussion be hijacked, but with a bunch of technical and treaty legalese. Okay, the point is, the courts have held that Americans abroad should be relieved from double taxation because of this. The Treasury Department is saying, not so fast, buddy. It is the policy of our department to impose double taxation on Americans abroad. That's the reality. Because if it weren't, they'd say, well, thank you, courts, for that clarification. But oh no, they're not doing that.
Well, and this just came out because we had today's show planned, and we're really talking about one of the John Richardson's other great quotes. The United States government is uncertain, a certain penalty for a certain penalty for uncertain.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's talk about that, Anthony, because I think that we're going to talk about green card holders. So I think one of the important questions of our age is, people say, well, what is the difference between a green card holder and a citizen anyway? And why should I become a citizen? And, different people see this differently. But I think we realize that for U.S. citizens, okay, we have certain penalties for uncertain conduct. But when it comes to green card holders, maybe this is the right segue to start the presentation. There we go. That's the difference. For green card holders, it's uncertain penalties for uncertain conduct, right? So in other words, green card holders out there, if you're grappling with the decision whether to become an American citizen or not, you might ask yourself, well, should I transition from a status of uncertain penalty for uncertain conduct? Should I graduate to certain penalties for uncertain conduct?
And that... the great John Richardson, thank you so much. It's kind of a hard podcast too because I'm listening. As you put these thoughts in my head, my brain is going like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then I'm listening to you on one end. And it's truly a position of honor from where I am right now. And this is where I wanted to talk to Keith about, because Keith, we're talking about, and really why I wanted to talk about this topic, the green card, the terrorism that green card holders are facing. Because one of my clients just sent an email, and she sent an email that really made, it took me aback, because she's fine. She has us, right? Everything's fine. She was like, right. I'm freaking out. The IRS is going to deport my husband. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You're fine. And, we started down, and I looked at the article she wrote. I said, okay, relax. And so that is really my incentive, because I know she's not alone. I know she's not alone where, you're having a U.S., and this is really where, Keith's group is, I think, really the sort of unwritten rule of the group. It's really a group for people who are living overseas and typically have a non-U.S. spouse, but oftentimes they will be in the U.S. for a part of time. And it really, what we talked about at the beginning of the case, the Treasury Department, again, this is why it's so important, Keith, that we were promised an end to double taxation for Americans abroad. Now these tax credits are for both U.S. expats and for those in the U.S. So that's why it's so important that we're, that's why I think it's critical. It's like, hey, look, this issue affects you, what the Treasury's doing, and it's also related. So that's why I wanted to, and I hope you don't mind, Keith. I hope you do.
No, not at all.
So,
there's another segment of the population that's green card holders in the United States who, for whatever reason, want to live outside the United States for a couple of years.
Right. So, and they want, and they're thinking, or sometimes they're thinking of renouncing. So that's another issue, or abandonment. So anyway, that's where, now Keith, and so in your group, what are you seeing of, and this is really where we have, and I'll just back up a little bit back to where I was, just, that we seem to have. And I was sort of thinking of this as I was, John, you guys were getting of this podcast. I was saying, I was really thinking of what Secretary Bresson said, strategic uncertainty. And this was a preview. He mentioned this and to say, hey, it's the strategy of the United States to have strategic uncertainty, so our negotiating partners are sort of off edge and we can negotiate better. Well, I started thinking about that. It's like, well, boy, the strategic uncertainty, it's like, well, that sounds like the U.S. tax code, and all the time, every day, we are trying to war game out these bizarre fact patterns where you're like, well, you're damned if you do this, you're damned if you do this, and you're like, okay, well, which is the best way to undamn yourself? That's sort of what you end up doing because of the uncertainty. A perfect example is the IRS lists a delinquent informational return process if you as a way to come into compliance. But the greatest risk of getting a penalty is by doing that program, because the IRS will mistakenly assess penalties that you have to fight. So even on their website, they say to do this, but you might not get it. That's strategic uncertainty. And then I think about the 2.3 million words in the U.S. tax code. I'm like, well, I don't think anyone asked for that, because no one could even read $2.3 million. So we know we can't have any representation because no one's even read it. And so when I look at the code, it's like it's nothing but strategic uncertainty all throughout. So my question to you, my question to you, Keith, is where are your people at with this? Are they freaking out, or they're just sort of ignoring it?
I don't think they fully understand it.
Okay.
I don't think
fair enough. Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Maybe that's the best protection too. Yeah.
But the strategic uncertainty does keep people away from the U.S. tax system, because it's too much to even handle or to deal with.
Yeah.
It's just easier to just not deal with it at all. And for some people, that works out just fine.
Yeah.
It just depends. Some people, they know that maybe down the road they might have to enter the U.S. tax system. They'll deal with it then, in hopes that something will change.
Yeah.
But there's really no cookie cutter answer.
It's
individuals' profile and circumstances.
And and maybe it's a good idea not to pay too much attention right now, because it is who knows what's really going on. Well, let's get to John's presentation. I looked at this as a fantastic one. I am excited to get into this. All right. So hey, I remember these guys.
Yeah, it was interesting. So we actually did a very significant green card one, a year ago. Interestingly, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, Yeah, if that's on the IRSMedic
You,
channel.
by the way, do you reckon that's you, Anthony?
Yeah, I know, right? That was me. Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
Way
we were
back
so
when.
we were so young back then. That was anyway. Yeah, if you want to go to the IRSMedic channel, you can find all our old content. We have a lot of green card content, so it's a fascinating topic. Thank you, John, for that plug of our great content. All right, great. So here we go. Okay, show me the green card, and I'll show you the deportable crime. A play there on Show Me the Man, Show Me the Crime.
Well, I mean, the problem with all of this is that, first of all, from a legal point of view, you can only, to maintain the green card, you have to maintain the intention to live permanently in the United States. You've got that, but then you've got, various issues that can lead to deportation. And, as all countries have. In fact, in my experience, one of the most significant reasons that people become citizens of the country they live in is to actually avoid the possibility of deportation. And these are honest, hardworking people. But, the reality is that in the modern world of, which I would generally include the United States, there's so many laws, okay, there's so many problems that, you just never know what's going to happen, right? I mean, in Canada, for example, recently, there was a horrible bus crash. A bunch of young hockey players were killed, and the driver was a permanent resident of Canada, not a citizen. There was no evidence that, there was any malice in this at all, although the accident was clearly his fault. But, immediately the discussion starts, deportation. So anyway, this is definitely true all over the world, but I think it's particularly true in the United States because of the vagueness of laws, right? Okay, next. Now, basically, so we all know this, and this is a tax channel, so I guess we start with that. But green card holders are automatically a tax resident of the United States, no matter where they are, like citizens. They're subject to the tax penalty reporting regime. They're estate and gift tax issues, and very significantly, they're subject to the exit tax rules, and that if they're covered expatriates. So there's a lot going on here. Okay, the United States is a much easier country to get into unscathed than to get out unscathed. Anyway, next.
That's true.
So we start from that as a background. Now.
John, if I could just interrupt because you did something I just want to clear. Back on this slide, you just said automatically a tax resident of the United States, and what that means is you're anywhere in the world, anywhere in the universe, you're taxable. That's what it means.
As long as you've got that green card, doesn't matter whether you leave the United States or not. Okay.
Yeah, everything is taxable.
Yeah, it's like citizen. Now, a lot of the penalty issues with green card holders. Like if somebody said to me and said, "I'm thinking of getting a green card," my immediate answer would be, if you have any money or assets, don't do it. Okay, don't move to the United States because of the foreign asset reporting regime and penalties. Anybody who's acquired any wealth, a business, mutual funds, et cetera, who then arrives in the United States is literally, coming to the United States with a huge established penalty base, right? And I think people should know this. The United States is a country you go to if you're penniless. It is not a country you go to if you have any assets that are non-U.S. assets. But anyway, next. Okay. Now, on the compliance thing, huge problems with this. Many of the problems with green card holders, in my experience, they don't even know they have problems. They just don't have the right kind of tax preparers. But next.
There's, and that's often what we're doing all the time. We're taking, we see returns all the time coming in, and I never, I guess I say when I see big mistakes from tax preparers, I actually don't you see so much of it, it's common. So I don't really fault them because it's just so incredibly difficult and, it's not very obvious at all. And the U.S. tax industry doesn't really make it a big deal. And the enrolled agent exam, by the way, if you go through it, you actually won't find any prompts on these international taxation, and it's the most complicated area. The IRS doesn't even test. The enrolled agent exam is a test the IRS administers to people so that they can represent taxpayers before the IRS, along with attorneys and CPAs. But it's an area They don't even bother teaching or testing. So it's
Maybe
quite
they should have a
fascinating.
separate exam to license people to work in this area.
Oh, who would be qualified to administer it? Oh, wait, I think. Oh, no, I don't want that job.
Next. Okay.
Right.
Now, from the point of view of green card holders and deportation, this is really, really interesting. Certainly, a conviction of what's called an aggravated felony, okay, would be a sufficient but not a necessary condition for deportation. Now, before we go to the next slide, part of the question is, what the hell does that mean? What would qualify as an aggravated felony or not? Now, let's go back to the summer of 2011, which was, where, the IRS had this OVDI program.
Yes.
And there was all this, talk about penalties for having to failed to file forms that nobody even knew about, et cetera, FBARs, et cetera. And I remember that a very large part of the discussion, okay, was all these green card holders, are trying to just live their lives as well as they could. This is only in America would this be possible, whether the failure to file an FBAR would be an aggravated felony. Okay, can you imagine being deported because you didn't file a form you didn't know about, right? But and I do not.
And a form that doesn't have anything to do with your tax. It doesn't really have anything to do with your tax bill. It's not tax, right? It's just a form, right?
But can you imagine? All right. Let's say this is the problem with professional lawyers and accountants, right? Is that they're easy to recognize because they don't understand context, right? They just read a bunch of stuff and and try to weave it together. But the thought of somebody being deported.
Well, don't you have a slide on that? Is that your next slide? You have a slide on this, don't you?
Yeah. Okay. On aggravated. Now here's how they define aggravated felony. Again, it's not clear. An offense that involves fraud or deceit, which the loss to the victim or exceeds $10,000. So we start with that. I don't know what that means. Fraud or deceit. Or is described in Section 7201 that has to do with tax evasion, which the revenue loss exceeds. So in other words, tax evasion, okay, would be an aggravated felony. Hard to know, but let's now go to the next slide here. Predictably, okay, this went to the Supreme Court of the United States. And this is an important case. So we have a restaurant owner, I guess in California, owned by Japanese citizens who are green card holders who basically pled guilty. As I understand it, they omitted a bunch of income or something of this nature. They then, deportation hearings began. So the thing went to the Supreme Court on the issue of whether tax evasion, would be an aggravated felony or not, right? And next.
And just I want to go back to here because I think I'll go against with your slide because hang on. I'll discuss here. Great.
Good discussion of this. Interestingly, this is from a Tax Connections article at the time. It's always interesting to see, years later what people were saying about this stuff. This article, although it's a good article, I don't think quite understands the issue, okay, because they were talking about it in the context of FBAR and that sort of thing. But ultimately, next slide. Next.
Yeah, and this is, the summer of 2021. Oh, this is what I wanted to bring up because we did pick up a lot of green card holders and our phone was ringing constantly. That's when it really picked up in 2011. And the problem is that we had green card holders who didn't know about the FBAR. They didn't know worldwide income was reportable, and it was brand new. No one knew about the FBAR the way I didn't learn about the FBAR until November 14th, 2009 myself when a client walked in the door. I'm like, oh, wow, you got a problem.
I don't think the FBAR really came to the front burner until after FATCA was implemented.
Oh, no, Keith, no. The FBAR
No,
was
no.
the
I mean, the FBAR's been around since the early 70s.
The FBAR was the driver. No. The FBAR was of the first round of clients to come through in 2011. The
Yeah.
FBAR was the driver. That
Okay.
and that was what the no. It was 2014 is when FACA letters came out, and that sent a whole bunch of people. That also
Got it.
created a huge rush. But the first round and the problem that
Was the FBAR. Okay.
the problem that we had in 2011 is people were calling us and we had to tell them the terms of the OVDI. There was no meaningful streamlined program. It was unclear, and I didn't know anyone who could qualify for it, and I actually don't know of anyone who ever did the original streamlined program of 2011, 2012. There was so narrow of who could qualify, and the relief was uncertain. So everyone who called, there was one solution. You have to do the full OVDI, which meant we had to do 8 years of tax returns.
Or not. I mean, or just comply going forward, or just
Yes, but at the time, but this is where I was in this world at the time. At the time, the IRS said, and this is one of the biggest lies they ever made, and it really soured me on the entire agency. You can't trust them because this is what they said. They said because they were like, okay, tax professionals, you better not advise anyone to do a quiet disclosure or compliance going forward because we're going to identify all the people making soft disclosures and we're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. That's what they were saying. I'm like, oh boy, this is terrible. And I'm like, you know what? It is actually pretty easy for them to find people who aren't doing that, who are doing soft disclosures. I'm thinking to myself, it's pretty easy to find them. Hey, just look for all the new, all the new FBARs being filed. Those are all your people. Go after them. And so I'm freaking out. And so I'm gearing up, by the way. I'm gearing up. My firm is gearing up for the massive amount of quiet disclosure examinations coming. We were the number one leader. You couldn't avoid us at the time. We're gearing up for it, and we had one call. We had one call from someone who made a quiet disclosure, and this is the facts. He didn't even know what was going on. He was kind of senile. We could talk to him a little bit, but apparently his tax professional just filed his returns outside the OVDI. And of course he was senile, so the IRS came after him with the most horrific FBAR penalties. There really wasn't anything we could do for him at the time. It was sort of over. But the IRS, and then they sent another press release out saying, I remember this well, we've identified 10,000 Americans who made soft disclosures and we're going to go after them with the fullest extent of the law. And again, never happened. And so that was one of the things you have to understand. They were jacking up the tax industry, and I apologize. I fell for it. I didn't know the IRS could lie with such ease. Now I know that. So that, shame on me, but that is what happened back in 2011. And so it was an awful, awful situation where, you're having people who are afraid of being deported. And we're saying, yeah, in order to do this offshore volunteer disclosure program, we're going to need $90,000 to pay, and you're going to have, for our legal fee, and you're going to owe a lot of money. And I didn't feel great about, I liked helping people, but they were put in a situation that was just unconscionable. And the government's never going to apologize for what they did. Like you treated everyone who didn't file an FBAR as a criminal. You treated everyone automatically, and that is just showing how little the Treasury even knows of its own regulations and what's there. So that's where I get, and that's sort of the history. I think what I remember as a history of why. Because if you look at my earlier content, you could see I'm a little bit on the bandwagon of the fearmongers, unfortunately, Keith, in full honesty. But that's why. So I think I've changed since then. All right, so John. All right, so
look,
go ahead, John.
2011 thing. Okay, my recollection was that was something that was said at a meeting of the American Bar Association or something like that. But look, the context of that, my reading of it was that it was not everybody. It was people who've been involved in willful misconduct. All right. In any case, regardless, of the interpretation of that, incorrect interpretation, over interpretation, whatever, 2011, 2012, and I guess 2010 were incredibly difficult, uncertain times. And for many green card holders, if you look at the bullet point at the bottom, in fact, the most important question of the 21st century for a green card holder is probably what level of form crime is required to have committed an aggravated felony. So, because, you've got all these tax people are saying, oh my God, you have to do this, you have to do that. But anyway, next slide. Let's see where this is going here.
Let's see where this is going here. Yeah, right on.
Okay. So here we have on cue. This was, not a bad article. I mean, it was 2015, 2016, aimed at green card holders. But again, all right, fanning the flames of fear, right? To what extent will the failure to file a form mean you should be deported? I mean, just think of this for a minute. I mean, no person on the street could even imagine that there should be any correlation between this kind of behavior and being deported, right? Especially when one of the problems of being deported is that it can subject you to the 877A exit tax, right? Next slide.
That is fascinating. I mean, so this is going on. This is a combination of crazy things. So the fear here is that because you didn't file an FBAR, you can be deported, and that your deportation triggers the exit tax, which you have no chance to plan for it. So now you're going to be hit with an exit tax that is vastly, punitive beyond belief. So all right, let's continue. So, all right, let's see where it goes. All right.
Oh, Anthony, there's you again. Look.
Hey, look, it's me again. Yeah. And by the way, I do want to just also point out the fact. Actually, no, I'll wait. Point that out. There we are again. We talked about this.
Keith too. There's Keith.
There's Keith.
There's a picture of Keith.
There we go.
There we are.
In our youth. Look at that. I look so
anyway,
youthful.
Let's talk about the whole issue of the exit tax, right? Now, this applies only to long-term residents, meaning they've had the green card for 8 of the previous 15 years. But there's plenty of them out there. So let's pause for a minute and imagine that, you're a green card holder in the United States and you're sitting there listening to some, tax jerk talking about this, right? Saying, oh, Jesus, oh my God, oh my, the failure to file, that form. Failure to disclose that you had a mutual fund outside the United States is of such gravity that it could be an aggravated felony, which could lead to your deportation. And how many years 9 years? Oh my God. And that could trigger the exit tax, meaning the confiscation of your assets at the moment they are rounding you up and sending you on a plane outside the United States. So I would think that, this would be an uncomfortable feeling. Okay, an uncomfortable feeling. I mean, what are you supposed to do? It also suggests a response. I think that somebody might think, oh my God, it might be riskier to try to fix this. Et cetera. I mean, it's terrible. And oh my God, Anthony, have we got uncertain penalty for uncertain conduct? And we don't even know if the damn thing is an aggravated felony or not, right? Next. This is so cool. I mean, only in America is this possible. Okay, so here we go. I mean, seriously, right? I think IRSMedic should go into, weekly comedy or something. This is so idiotic. Now, here we go. Long-term resident, blah, blah, blah. And you'll notice that the date of leaving, in case of a long-term resident, the date on which the individual ceases to be a lawful resident, according to another section of the code. You notice you never can get an answer out of the code. You always have to go, oh, it's like a treasure hunt. Reading the internal, it's a treasure hunt. We go here, we go there, we go everywhere. So now let's go to 77016 to figure out what it means. Okay, next.
This is so representative of the will. People love treasure hunts, and that's what's so exciting. It's like an escape room, right?
Quick,
that's like an escape room. You're not going to escape.
Section of the Internal Revenue Code. You know why? Because if we don't do it quickly, we're going to forget why we went there, right? Yes? Quick. All
right, we go. All right.
Oh my God.
Here we go.
See what we've there's two ways, or well, there's three ways. So you can cease to be a green card. You can hand in the green card, but of course, we know what happens if you do that and you're a long-term resident. Trouble.
By the way, I just want to let people know Keith did have to drop off. He's busy making his move, so he had to go take care of some movers. So he dropped off, and I'll give you some plugs for him. I want to thank Keith so much for joining. All right, John, go back. Go ahead.
So we have, the second way is, oh my God. I mean, they say, buddy, your failure to disclose that you have a mutual fund outside the United States is an aggravated felony. Okay? So we have that. Or to really complicate things, and to appeal to the green card holders who have more of an intellectual bent, we have the possibility of expatriation by tax treaty as well. So, I mean, there's just no end, to how the failure to file, disclose you have a mutual fund could impact your life. Look at this. Okay, next slide. Well, deportation. Now, here's the thing, if, by the way, along the way, we've talked about this before, somebody says, would you like to file an I-407? And that's the voluntary abandonment of the green card. You say, no, not really. Because, the moment you do that, of course, you've ended your tax residency and could be subject to this. So just remember that, Okay, next slide. So, in other words, by deportation, boom, you can be subject to the exit tax. Next. Treaty. Well, now this is interesting. This is very interesting. And this is, I would say, not adequately understood.
Yeah, I don't get it. So, help me here. I don't know what this is.
Well, basically, if you were to leave the United States as a green card holder and file a 1040 NR, right? Meaning that you are taking advantage of the fact that as a dual tax resident, you're using the treaty tie break to take the position that you're not a tax resident of the United States anymore. That would be, I'm not going to say it guarantees it because I think that's an open question, but that certainly is the beginning of a process where you've expatriated through the treaty without anything else. And there's been some interesting cases on this in the last year.
Wait a sec. I think I get what you're saying now. Wait a second.
I hope you're not filing 1040 NRs, Anthony, with your clients outside.
No. We never have. But now I see the temptation. Oh my God! I never thought of that. Okay. All right. So I will rephrase because I didn't get what John was saying. So I'll rephrase it in my own language. Okay. So what John's saying is that, one way to get out of U.S. taxation is that, and this is an advantage that many non-residents have. Often they get a better, more preferential tax treatment investing in the U.S. than an American would. It's really something else. So, what happens is that if you're not in the U.S., people are like, okay, yeah, I'll take and they're on a green card. They're going to take a closer connection test so that they don't have to pay.
No, closer connection test is a completely different thing.
I'm sorry.
Let's do
Thank
a separate podcast.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, the bottom line is this. I want to keep this simple, conservative, without going into a lot of detail. If you're a green card holder and you are living outside the United States, you should be extremely cautious about filing a 1040 NR because it may begin a process that leads to an automatic expatriation, which involves exit tax, HOR, and covered gift HOR. Let's leave it at that for now, okay?
Here's a quick question. Won't that 1040 NR trigger a foreign asset, Church? Thank you for that question. No, okay. Thank you for that question, Andrew. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate getting new viewers in the comments. Thank you so much. And we do see the comments. We're going to get to them. I see a lot of my favorites are here today. Thank you so much, guys. We'll get to you towards our end. All right, so that is. I never thought of that. That's a great danger point, though, right? And that's not on the enrolled agent test.
No, it's not. Okay, next. Now, a lot of part of the problem is by arriving in the United States. That old Eddie Murphy movie, Coming to America. Well, this guy came. He obviously had a bunch of foreign assets That is not how you want to come to America. You want to reduce your penalty-based footprint before coming to America. It makes it harder for them to impose penalties on you, right? Now, this is not legal advice. These are some things to think about, and this is a generalization. But generally, there are rules to the effect that you can plan for this by moving your foreign assets into trust as long as it's 5 years before coming to America. Okay, that will avoid the grantor trust problem. Get rid of CFCs. There is nothing the United States hates more than one of its tax residents running a business outside the United States. They hate that. Okay?
That is, yeah, absolutely.
Consider getting rid of any non-U.S. mutual funds. Now, let's say you have assets. You've had a property that's been in the family for 100 years with a built-in capital gain of millions of dollars. Sell the thing before coming to America, because otherwise they're going to claim the right to tax that $1 million when you sell it.
And let me just restate what John's saying. This is probably one of the biggest shocking embarrassments of the U.S. tax code. I encountered it. I remember it was years ago. It was a guy from Greece, and he said, "Hey, I got a problem." "Oh, what's that?" "Oh, I came here on the Greencard, and the IRS sent me a tax bill." What's that for?" "Oh, it's like, well, I sold my property, and they're claiming that I have a tax bill of $1 million because they're saying my basis is basically zero." And it's like, "Oh, I became a U.S. person, just a few years ago." And this is what I learned, and I never even knew about this. And this is something that's not on the enrolled agent exam, is that when you become a U.S. person, your basis is on the property. What we would assume would be the fair market value of the date you became a U.S. person, because that's sort of the value when you expatriate, right? It's like, okay, hey, I'm no longer a U.S. person, so be the value. But no, the U.S. government will go back in ancient history to, I guess, I guess they'll go through records to say, what's the real value of this property? And if you inherited something many, many years ago, and that had just exactly as John said, you could experience a tax rate beyond 1,000%. And actually, you actually can. It's an undefined tax rate because it is incredible, and this is actually there. It is the law. It's one of the biggest things. I just always try to get this out there before become a green card holder, before becoming a U.S. person. Make sure you have no built-up capital gains, because if you ever dispose of those assets, you are going to get whacked in ways you will not understand. And it is a surprise, and it is what the U.S. is, and there's a certain penalty for uncertain contact. Or no, which way is that, John?
Well, I think for green card holders, because of all the moving parts, I think it's uncertain penalty for uncertain.
Yeah.
But if you become a citizen, the penalties become certain.
There you go.
Certain conduct. I mean, that's the benefit of being a U.S. citizen.
Certain dies, those penalties. There we go. There we go.
All right.
There we go.
Well, that's really about all I got to say.
Well, all right. So now thank you, John. Now I want to go so we're talking about this, and I'll go back to this slide here, I think, because this was the article that is pretty interesting here. Okay. So this is the sentence at the end of the first paragraph is the part where it's like, this might be going off the rails right here. Based on the rationale of Kawashima, a criminal conviction for failure to file an FBAR may also lead to deportation because it would most likely be deemed an aggravated felony involving...
I think that's an outrageously stupid statement.
Yeah, that's the part that gets aggravated involving fraud or deceit in an attempt to willfully hide financial information from the U.S. authorities. Well, we go back to where you have the law. Where did you have the law? Right here? Where's the law you had? Here we go.
That's the Supreme Court decision. By the way, a 6-3 decision.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually, I think that all lawyers in this area probably should read that decision. But, it's...
Well, this is what I was looking at. Okay, this is what I want to look at, the definitions, okay? What's an aggravated felony? And this is sort of just to separate fear from what reality is here. Okay, an aggravated felony involves fraud or deceit in which the loss to the victim or victims exceeds $10,000. Well, the FBAR can't do that.
Well, I don't know, Anthony. I mean, they would argue, in all seriousness, okay, that the cost to investigate this stuff is more than $10,000. right?
Oh, you never know.
Look, I just don't think. I mean, look. Let's go back. Don't go back there, but let's refer to the statement that the guy made in writing the article. Look, you can. There can be an FBAR violation without even knowing what you're doing. Okay, and I think it is an incredible stretch to equate all FBAR violations with aggravated felonies. But the real point is this. Okay. Is that there's a real shortage of competent advisors in this area. I mean, a real shortage.
Yeah,
okay. And, for this type of, it's not that the statement is wrong. Okay. But it's very unlikely to be correct. Okay.
Well, look, I want to just say, now I'm kind of thinking, at first I'm like, oh man, this guy's going over the top here. But now I'm like, well, maybe that last sentence would become U.S. law at some point as well too. I don't think we could. So I would say and I think there's significant problems with that leap. That is, there's the law, but we know that the U.S. government ignores the law, invents the law. And just one thing I want to bring up, because John and I discussed this, and I think it bears to be be repeated once again. But folks. The FBAR isn't even legal. It's not legal. Let me just get to let me add this let me remove this here, add this to the stage. There it is. John and I did a video. I think you're on this one too, John. I'm sorry. I just had room for myself in the thumbnail. That's what I do. But look, the FBAR has significant problems with it. We've gone over this many times on this channel. I could do it very, very quickly. If you look at the authorizing statute for what Treasury claims gives them the authority for the FBAR, it's 31 U.S.C. 5314. 31 U.S.C. 5314 regulates the import and export of monetary instruments. That is, cash, checks, things that move in commerce. That's what it regulates. And the regulation says, pursuant to 3153 USC, which requires an FBAR form, but you go to the law, like, no, it doesn't. And the point is this: since Loper Bright, the Supreme Court has ruled regulations must bear some semblance to the authorizing statute. We just can't defer blindly to whatever Treasury is claiming. We actually got to look at the law to say, hey, did Congress mean to create this law? Does this law exist? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. The FBAR is purely a creature of regulation that cannot withstand a Loper Bright challenge. I'm hoping to bring one soon. Hopefully someone else will as well, because it's totally, totally illegal. But that is what we're dealing with. And I put a link to the video in the super chat, by the way, for that. That's what you're dealing with when you're talking about, hey, you might be deported for not filing a form that's not authorized by law. That's what we're trying to say here. That's really the issue, John. Do you see that? That's what I'm trying to say. You might be deported for not filing a form not authorized by law.
Well, why is this a problem?
Yeah. So if that's true, then and I think that's the thing as well, and that's the problem that we have as advisors, is that we have so much uncertainty, and that's really, and I think this is a great time to talk about, you always learn things doing this, and somebody says something, like, man, that really makes a lot of sense. Well, we get a lot of referrals from financial advisors, and, we have talked to them, talk shop, financial advisor, it's the nice people. And, one of them said to me last week, said this. He goes, other than bringing on new clients, my only job is to manage my clients' emotions.
Well, that's right. This is, what is that? Who is it? When people fear the government, there is tyranny. When government fears the people, there is liberty.
Oh, I like that. Who's that? Is that John Richardson?
No, absolutely not. It was, it's easy to find. I mean, it's from one of the founding fathers, I think. But I mean, it's absolutely true. And there's no question that because of the uncertainty and vagueness of these laws, coupled with the, just off the chart consequences for violation, I think that, the U.S. people live with a lot of fear, okay?
And it's by design, and it's really the government isn't. The government is doing this by design. To subject you, and we've gone over this before, to demoralize. It's a way to. It's mind control, people. It's mind control. Let's get to that. That's what we were dealing with, to subjugate us and to abuse us, and I think that's really what's going on. Well, we do have time for some comments, so let's get to those. So I think that's what we have before we get too repetitive here. So let's see what we got here today. So Gabe wants to come on the show. You've had him on. I think I should. I think I should have Gabe on the show to talk about his.
I think you should have Gabe on the show. Yeah.
All right, Gabe. All right, we'll schedule it up. Okay. I'm gonna send you an email. I got your email. So yeah, right, exactly. I want to go into this. He's got yeah. And the emails prove the IRS lying in multiple subjects. And back to where we were, great comment on this, Gabe. Appreciate this. I wanted to bring this up at the time, but I will bring it up again. When we talk about both parties failed, again, folks, you can't look, they're the same team and they just work against each other. So you accept the other as the alternative antidote to the problems of the other one. And then it ratchets back and forth, and we end up with
Anthony,
complete tyranny.
I think his spelling of parties absolutely gives it away. The whole point is, well, the political, Gabriel, you're absolutely right. The political parties in America are, but
they're having parties. That's right. They are having parties. Maybe we're not so much. Brilliant point. Yeah, thank you, John. And really, it's like,
you're absolutely right. I mean, that was a test for you, Anthony.
And it's, again, both parties have a long legacy of using the tax code to abuse Americans, and both of them have a long legacy of appearing to be the solution to horrible taxation, and both parties, when they're the given powers, impose horrible taxation. While we were talking about 2011, where Obama's Treasury Department was doing terrible things, lest us not forget who started this entire disaster and why. And the answer was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln imposed the country's first income tax and specifically imposed citizenship-based taxation with a higher rate for Americans living overseas. Why did Abraham Lincoln do this? Because they wouldn't fight in his war. They didn't want to be slaves. They didn't want to be conscripted to fight in a war for whatever reasons it was. That is the value of the United States of America. If you don't fight in our useless war, we're going to tax you like you wouldn't believe, buddy, and you're going to feel it. And that's been going on since then. And the parties takes turns at their various roles and abusing Americans, claiming that they're going to be, we're on the side of the little guy, which never happens, right? We got Andrew Prune. Thank you very much, Gabe. Thank you, and we'll have you on to talk about the illegal actions of the IRS. Looking forward to that. Andrew Prune, Mr. Common Law is here. Foundation needs to be no remedy in politics. Yeah, you're right. And
I think what he's saying is these problems that we're talking about, which may include double taxation, are simply a manifestation or extension. Okay. Of these foundational issues. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
I think you should invite him on the show as well.
Yeah. No. Andrew has got a lot of thoughts, and again, I feel like I'm trying to catch up to him. He's got a real great foundation in common law, and in really, I think, a legal basis that sort of I might have known at one point, maybe, but years of doing this stuff, whatever it is. And not using it whatsoever. I think I might have forgotten about it. So I think I should have Andrew on as well. So Andrew, we're gonna have to. Hopefully you want to get on here. Let's see here. Okay, this is Vin. Thank you, Vin. Thanks for joining us. After I saw how ending citizenship-based taxation wasn't included in the big ugly bill, I sped up my timeline of getting a second citizenship.
Let me just add something to this. Look. There's no group of people on the planet that are more in need of a second citizenship than U.S. citizens. Okay? Whether you plan to renounce or not, or whatever, okay, I think it's gotten to the point, right, where the abuse based on citizenship, all right, has gotten so bad that people need to find some kind of a mechanism to get out of this. Now, I have said repeatedly for people who are involved in family planning issues. Okay, you want your kids born outside the United States so they have dual citizenship from birth. I think that we should do a separate podcast, Anthony, and what is becoming incredibly apparent is the ramping up of citizenship-based taxation. And by that I mean taxation where citizenship is an issue. Look at the remittance tax. Who pays it? Non-citizens. Look at the 899 thing in the big beautiful bill. Who's exempt from it? U.S. citizens. Okay? Look at this thing, if I'm understanding this correctly, that's going on in Spain right now, dealing with the housing shortage there. Who are they talking about imposing a huge tax on? People who are not citizens of EU countries, okay? I mean, we are actually seeing the rollout of citizenship being used as both a way to avoid certain types of punitive taxation penalties or direct taxation. What does this mean? Okay. It means that in general, if you're able to get second citizenships, if they're available to you, particularly through things like descent and that, only a total fool would not grab that opportunity while it exists. Do not believe for a moment that opportunities that exist today will exist tomorrow.
Yeah, and John, I think one of the things that most people might not realize is, I can't get a citizenship. I don't have the money to do it. I can't do the investments. I don't do that. But I'm not sure if it would be helpful because I didn't know this till recently myself, but I could get an Italian citizenship. I could qualify for one of those, and that's probably my best bet. And my boys can get Hungarian through their mom. And I think it's like maybe we should. I'm not sure if this is already covered enough, but a podcast on countries that you might you might qualify for a citizenship because you have enough and I'm not 100% Italian anyway, but I'm enough. To be so maybe that's would be a helpful podcast.
Well, I think that these things are helpful, okay, for sure, and and the goalposts on that type of stuff are constantly shifting. But the key point is this: is that citizenship matters, and it matters hugely, and it matters in ways that it matters in so many ways that if you even understand 50% of them on any given day, you're doing very, very well. And of course, in the context of this global recognition of the importance of citizenship, there is one citizenship where many people have and are making the decision to get rid of, and that is U.S. citizenship because of the problem of the regulatory regime. U.S. citizens cannot live freely if they leave the United States, basically. But anyway, next comment.
All right. Well, I think we got a big one from Andrew here. Oh, by the way, it looks like comments from Twitter I can access. So, all right, I guess the platform's been updated somehow. So this is great. So, yeah, if you are on Twitter and you do want to comment, I can respond. So this is great. All right. So Andrew's got a comment. To say a president has power to alter law is to say we don't understand.
Well, this is why, Andrew should just be invited, okay, to participate in a full-blown discussion. It's very difficult to sort of, deal with.
Andrew, you're promoted. We're not going to take your comments anymore. We're just going to get you on the show, okay?
Well, I think that would be helpful. I mean, I think that this is an important conceptual discussion. I really do, but it's very, very difficult, to sort of, incorporate these, these more cabined off comments, etc. But I think it's an important discussion.
Yeah. Let's see here. Gabe, teasing the show we're going to do. Gabe, he's got proof that, and then this is the link to the FBAR is illegal. So if you just want to check that one out, guys, if you want to go there. And let's see here. Borchell. Good morning, Borchell. Nice to see you this morning. Okay, what's this mistake he's got? Do we not repeat my mistake? I sold my children inside the 5-year rule prior to coming to the U.S.
Yeah. Okay. this is why you need to find and be willing to pay for competent advice. Okay.
And not all
Here's
advice
the
is the
basic,
same.
here's the
Yeah.
basic problem. All right. And, I get this occasionally, and I recognize and I have zero tolerance for it, right? These are the do-it-yourself people who want the answer to a specific question. They figure they've got everything figured out except for, they just need this, the answer to one question. Run from that kind of person, okay? Because, they don't know what they're doing, okay? They just sort of think they figured this out. What people have got to do is they've got to find an advisor they trust. They have to have a completely open discussion. And they have to let the advisor decide what are the issues, okay, that matter here, and not go in with some predefined, I know everything except this, okay? There's, a lot of that going on. Bad move.
Let's see what Borchell. Let's see historical proof when these parties did actually work in opposition. Yeah. Oh, Borchell. Okay, so I can help you out on this one, Borchell. Where he's saying, I would like to see historical proof where these parties did actually work in opposition from each other. Okay, so 1913. I think you'll appreciate this joke. In 1913, every single Republican was against the newly income tax. Abraham Lincoln's did sunset in 1876. It did sunset. They tried to bring back an income tax without the 16th Amendment. They brought back, then they got the 16th Amendment. Its ratification is highly suspicious. And in 1913, every Republican was firmly against the income tax, saying this is a terrible idea. We shouldn't do it. There were more Democrats, and there was a Democratic president, so it was signed into law. The very next year, you couldn't find one Republican to disagree. So the question is, did Republicans really object, or were they just sort of playing possum? And then as soon as they saw that federal money coming in, they were just as happy as the Democrats. Think about all the power they had, and now they had the ability to hand out this large federal money and become more important. So I think the answer is, and so that's basically what you see, is that they will stage themselves, just staying silent in opposition, but what they really want is the same exact thing. They'll just pretend we're on the side of small government. Well, if the Republicans were against the income tax in 1913 and didn't control the House, well, now they do. Now the Republicans do. So why aren't they proposing to eliminate the federal income tax now that they do have political power? Yeah, because they are in on it 100%. No question about it. So, all right. Well, I think we got one more. Yeah, exactly. And my answer is kind of a bad joke too, Borchell. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that too. Yeah. And the cheap advice is really, really the most expensive. And this is what I would say is that I have been noticing something, and I've actually seen this from another content creator in the tax space. We are getting destroyed by AI. Our views are everything we do, everything we say is getting scraped by AI. And if you're popular, they're stealing from you, and it's reformed and reconstituted. The critical thing for people to do is to understand is AI is great at outranking actual content now. So you really need to make sure you're communicating to your friends, because you cannot expect them. The internet is one big massive pit of deception, and Google is fantastic at it. And Google is really responsible for many people winding up with significant problems. And by the way, and just a quick aside how bad it is. I don't know if you remember John Anthony Castro. He built himself as a U.S. attorney who was an international expert. I had some words with him because he was giving people totally nonsense advice and doing something crazy. I'm like, I think this guy is just scam artist, is what I kind of said. I don't think he's an attorney. And so I had some words with him. And he then turned around and hired a firm to give me negative reviews on Google. Google still won't remove those reviews. So IRSMedic has negative reviews against it. So if you could go give IRSMedic a few positive reviews on Google, that'd be appreciated. But the point is this: in his testimony, because he is in prison right now, he claimed that he was suffering from some mental disease that required him to lie. That's basically what he says. I'm suffering from a mental disease that required me to lie. And this is what he said in his testimony. He goes, I couldn't believe how easy it was to present myself as an expert. I couldn't believe how quick I could grow. And I couldn't believe how easy it was for me to get qualified clients off of Google AdWords that would pay what I would do and everything. His trial testimony is truly an indictment of Google, whereas most searches are coming from. So I think the biggest problems that Americans have is, number one, the tax code is so confusing. You're looking for answers. Now the second problem is this. Now your next enemy is Google, who you're going to trying to find answers, but it may lead you exactly to the wrong person who will be spending, maybe they'll be spending time in federal prison for what they lied to you about, and maybe you'll get some of your penalties abatement. Maybe you won't be indicted either. But that is one of the things I think everyone needs to understand, is that Google gives legal advice and will send you to someone completely unverified. They're trying to change that now. They're trying to change that because they're actually requiring for local services ads that you actually have to, they're going to verify that you're an attorney. They couldn't do that before, but many people, outbidding attorneys for keywords. Oh, get this best tax attorney ever. Okay, they're not an attorney. And it's like, you just can't compete. So I think that's one big part of, maybe this is its own podcast, the one big deception of how Google will present something to you and send you exactly to the wrong person. And it's really disgusting. And the only way to fight that is through sort of word of mouth, is that we have to communicate. So it's a very, maybe it's this one. And maybe this, Borchell, we might have to do this. And I actually have a friend out in Chicago. He's a tax attorney as well. And he had a nice little clip on LinkedIn, and he was kind of talking about this. And I think I might get him on to talk about it. John, would you want to be on a talk on AI talk? Because I think this is actually this might be our...
Sure. I mean, to the extent that I can contribute.
Okay.
I think, though, that there is a partial antidote for this, okay? And I think that what's important in these discussions is to reference actual law, actual statutes, okay, et cetera, not just sort of multiple levels of hearsay. Because I have, over the years, pretty much concluded that it's a very, very small percentage of people who talk about this stuff who actually read these statutes, right, and are able to work from them. So anyway.
Yeah, and I think
problem.
and I think it's the big problem, and it's going to really be. I think I see myself how AI is transforming. It's making. I think we should do pretty good with our content marketing, but now it's really, really hard for our message to get out there. We do get a lot of referrals. That's what keeps us alive. It used to be all our new clients came. Most of our clients came through YouTube. Now it's basically the clients that came through YouTube referring their friends. So it's just awful, because the advice that people are getting out there from the fear mongers, they're the same ones. They were around, and they're still doing their thing.
It is very, very clear that the number of really good advisors in this area is extremely limited. Okay. But part of the problem is that people believe what they want to believe, right? I mean, people get exactly the advisor that correlates to what they think their understanding of the problem is, right? So they think that they've identified an issue, and they will just, sign up for somebody, sort of agrees with their point of view. Over the years, I have, evolved to the point, and I don't mean that necessarily in a positive sense, okay, but that I no longer see even the simple things as simple, because of the number of of issues that can be triggered here. And I've seen over the years so many people's problems begin with something like FBAR. And so we're going to fix an FBAR, and then how that cascades into this and to that, et cetera. However, AI is transforming a lot of things. Apparently, AI was the driver behind that Ukraine attack on the Russian jets as well. So this is the world that we're living in. It reminds me of what's that early Raquel Welch movie about? Or what was it? Was it Fantastic Voyage or something? This sort of world, HAL, the supercomputer. We're way beyond that now.
We're beyond HAL.
Not only.
Yeah, and this is
the primary driver. What people even imagine to be reality is now being determined by AI.
And I think, Borchell, this is kind of, people want advice that entertains them. Well, I think that suits them, I would say. Suits them is maybe the word I would use, but a true advisor gives you what you need and not what you want. And that's, a true advisor is going to be uncomfortable letting you go. Because you're not you're not going to do this, because a true advisor knows what happens when a client doesn't follow their advice. They know what happens. And like, look, I don't want to be a part of this disaster. You're not listening to what I'm saying to do. I want you to do the right thing. I have a whole plan. I've been through this. Like, this is what I do. And it's just like, well, and the problem too is like any email you send to a client or any communication, they could just check with AI to see how right you are. They can just see how right you are with AI. They can audit everything you're doing.
Well,
okay, so the AI, you're what? So it's really baffling, and it really stinks. And I think that's just one of the problems. All these things interfere with the attorney-client relationship as you're trying to protect someone. They're going out for information that's like, oh God, you're filling your head with nonsense. It's like, nope, that's not going to work. But this is not to say, it's not to say you shouldn't share perspectives. I learn wonderful things from my clients. You're kidding me? That's why I enjoy it so much. The things that I learn from my clients are amazing. So it's great to have a relationship, but you really want to, I think when you have an advisor, you really got to know they're the one, and then you got to actually trust them and not just, use them as your AI confirmer or denier. Are you going to confirm or deny this AI? I think that's where we are on that. And it's a huge issue. Yeah, so I think this is the future of what we're happening. I'm seeing AI transform content marketer. A lot of people are going to be getting out of this space, and these live things are sort of harder for AI to, they'll be scraping this and grabbing whatever content, I'm sure. But at least live, this is something they have difficulty stealing before. They'll steal it once it's on replay, but they can't steal it live.
Anthony, do you realize how talking about things like 899, do you realize how far ahead of this we were? That we got this stuff out really quickly.
No.
Better than almost anything that's, been replicated since. So, I feel actually good about that.
Well, that is something, because I did find a lot, one of the interesting things I found back when I started blogging a lot and doing content on 2011, I did notice how some of the things that I said, kind of maybe, artistic license a little bit. Hey, I'm a content creator. Hey, it was picked up as conventional wisdom in the tax industry. I was like, why are you saying that? I just see people making comments. I'm like, I don't know if that's true. I just made that up, but like you're saying it's true, so okay. And then it kind of became a thing, and that's how and I would say this too, is that AI models are looking at the earliest our content on 899, and so it will adopt it. It's not going to give us any attribution, but it will probably adopt because we're the first movers and we're actually right on it. So I would say that's the good news, at least. The good news is we make great content. The bad news is, you'll never know it was us.
You know what? That's okay. I'm actually very proud of some of that stuff.
I know, that was wonderful.
The point is that these presentations that were done, they were invented here. Okay, it wasn't reading other people's stuff, right?
Yeah.
I saw one about 899 written by some advisor a couple days ago who was, started talking. He pulled exactly off the presentation. This business about the creation of the external revenue. He even quotes, the Trump thing. It was so obviously he just took the thing off the presentation.
Oh, it's nice. It's nice. We're
Anyway,
all right. We're on a higher frequency. So, folks, I do want to thank. Let's conclude our show. I want to thank everyone for showing up. We got some new viewers. Really, really exciting to do, and we have so much fun doing this. I do want to give again a shout out for Keith. He did have to step out early, but if you are someone who is an expat, or maybe you're just married to a non-U.S. person, this is the support group he has. Again, here's the link to it. Also, Keith does like to, again, because I think what I was saying earlier before, a lot of my job is managing my clients' emotions. We're trying to, okay, here's your problem. Here's the solution. This is why it's the right thing. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's our timeline. Here's your issue. Come back with your issues. That's how we like to do it. Sometimes, though, a tax professional, a tax attorney is not the first person to go to manage to try to get some help with your emotions. It could be Keith's group, or maybe even you might want to send an email to Keith because he does talk to people one-on-one. And here is his email. You can reach out to Keith there, and also you can find him on Facebook too and send him a direct message. But US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. You could reach out to him there if you're having wonders if you should renounce, what you should do if you should become a U.S. person, what you should do about your situation. If international tax anxiety is making your life miserable between you and your spouse, Keith is the first guy to reach out to. I just want to say that. And now, if you are thinking about making that leap, upgrading yourself, getting rid of our metaphor, getting rid of that two-door Dodge Stratus. It's not any more sporty than the four-door, which has the practicality. If you want to upgrade to that four-door Dodge Stratus and renounce your U.S. citizenship, it's a long joke, guys. You'll have to look at some real content to get that one. You can reach out to John Richardson at citizenshipsolutions@proton.mail.com. As you can tell, John really, John is really does help form the backbone of a lot of the discussions. I would like to take credit for probably more than I should, and I probably will. But John is really, a foundational deep thinker who actually goes to the source documents. And I would say John understands the U.S. Treasury far better than anyone in U.S. Treasury. I'm probably close. Not nearly as in depth as John, and he understands immigration better than ICE does. So if you want to really, someone who has a fundamental understanding of law, who isn't afraid of independent thought to apply in your unique situation to get you a solution that is good for you, reach out to John. Citizenshipsolutions@protonmail.com. He is really, fantastic. And then lastly, myself, I do this podcast. We pick up a lot of great clients with this podcast. I love it. Kind of get to know who I am, what my firm is. So we do a lot. We do a lot of streamlined disclosures. We will do your exit tax if that's something that you need to do. A lot of streamlined disclosures, even tax prep. That's what, a lot of things going on, and we do. One of the things that's hard for people to find. I'll tell you this. This is something I belong to. Our firm belongs to a tax advisor group. There's a lot of tax advisory groups out there that help people. Hey, let's figure out ways to save money on taxes. The big group that I belong to, I am the one in the entire group who can handle international tax planning. It's incredibly difficult. You can find a million real estate tax advisors, people who will advise real estate investors, but not very many who can advise on international tax planning, whether estate planning, income tax planning, coming to the U.S. You can reach out to us there. Go to IRSMedic.com or just send me an email at aparent@IRSMedic.com. And with that, I think we're gonna next week.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Hey, whoa. So just before we close today, I was listening to you, I was reading off the New York Times app right now. So here is the top article of the day. Right now, recognizing that the New York Times is, of course, notoriously anti-Trump. Nevertheless, here's the title of this article. After muscling their bill through the House, some Republicans have regrets. Subheading: the legislation carrying President Trump's domestic agenda squeaked through. Ready for this? But some Republicans now say they didn't realize what they voted for. Not a single goddamn one of them realized what they voted for. Who had time to read this? Are you kidding me? Absolutely ridiculous.
I went through the whole thing, and I went through the whole thing in 2 hours, and there were still things like, no, that's not enough time. But I had enough recognition to know what things were changing, and I had my
Anthony,
breadth of knowledge. But yeah,
like me, it would take a tremendous amount of time.
Yeah.
To go through that, if you could even understand it.
If you could even understand it, right?
So I think this is absolutely hilarious. So now what we have in modern 21st century democracies are democracies where legislatures are signing on to laws that they don't know what's in them. I mean, maybe Nancy Pelosi was a prophet back in 2012 when she said, well, we really need to pass the law to see what's in it.
That was the best. And I think that's what we have. And she just, great. She just articulated the policy. We should thank her. Like, oh, wow. Yeah, that is what goes on, right? They're just told what to do.
Oh, my God, I have to go. I've got a meeting. It's 9:00.
All right. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.